Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 12th of December 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, Scotland apparently has the best of the weather today. Cloudy, overcast, but dry. The rest of UK seems to be pretty cold with mizzy fog dampness.
Yes, is that how we describe
the political
Michael Fallon?
Michael Fallon, he would fit the picture perfectly, I think.
So he was on the Andrew Marr show yesterday, trying to justify Boris Johnson's comments about Saudi Arabia, and of course Boris was straight off trotting off to Saudi Arabia over the last day or two, following up from Theresa May's visit to the Gulf recently. Well, yesterday Fallon said, let's be clear about this, the way some of his remarks, that's Boris's remarks, were reported, seemed to imply that we didn't support the right of Saudi Arabia to defend itself.
Wow.
So that seems like an attack on the press, first of all, because it's the press's fault. And second of all, we're suggesting that Saudi Arabia has the right to bomb the hell out of Yemen because that's defending itself.
Yeah. There's a lot of confusion coming into force, Mike, at the moment over what's being reported in the press and what politicians say, and they didn't really mean it because they didn't really understand what they said in the first place.
Did Yemen invade Saudi Arabia? Were you aware of that?
I think there was a strong military presence lining itself up to do just that.
Oh, really? Right. Okay. Well, there you go. So that was why.
I hope nobody believes that. I just thought I'd try that out.
Well, anyway, Boris Johnson is in the Gulf at the moment, as I say, following up from Theresa May's visit last week, and he was giving a speech to the Gulf at the Manama Dialogue in Bahrain, right? This is what most of it was nonsense, but he ended up by really highlighting the quality situation of Britain, where he said, the Shard, that's owned by the Qataris, and they also own the Olympic Village, Harrods, Chelsea Barracks. The United Arab Emirates owns the Excel Exhibition Centre and the Tidal Array, which is the Tidal Barrage. Does that mean that if they feel like it, they can stop it going up?
I'm sure that will be the case.
Right, okay. And they also own the Emirates cable car. Let's not forget about that. And it's a little known fact, apparently, that Kuwait owns the City Hall itself. Yep. So there you go. So Britain owned by Britain. This is brilliant. But what else did he have to say? He said, we export colossal and ever-growing numbers of Jaguar cars and Land Rovers, but they're not British.
No, we've pointed this out, the state of the automotive industry, which is leading the world, apparently. It's just that we don't produce any cars ourselves.
That's right. So anyway, in return for the fact that we've sold off everything that we have in London, we're exporting Jaguar cars and Land Rovers. Apparently all the various, let's not forget Marks and Spencers as well, because they're in force, apparently. But all that adds up to £20 billion a year for the UK economy in exports. So that's good stuff. And then he said, he was talking about the Suez crisis, and he said almost 50 years since that famous disagreement in the British cabinet, which went the wrong way. I hope we can conclude that this event and the conversation has ended in a triumphant vindication of George Brown, at least in the sense that Britain is back east of Suez, not as the greatest military power on earth, though we can certainly pay our share, and we certainly have a fantastic capability. I'm not quite sure what to say to that, Brian, but this guy clearly believes his own rhetoric.
It's hard to actually understand what these people are saying now because they're clearly living in their own reality. So we've got a military which has been decimated. We've spent 350 million, I think it is, building this base in Bahrain, but the ships can't go there because they don't work in warm water. But we are now a power again. And is this man's living in, as we say regularly, he's in La La Land.
Yes. Okay, well, the situation in Syria continues. And, all the mainstream media having to report that basically most of eastern Aleppo has now fallen to the Syrian army, which is good news. Over 95% is the latest figure. So a report from the Russian Center for Syrian Reconciliation said this morning that over the past 24 hours, the Syrian armed forces have liberated 3/4 of the eastern part of Aleppo. So over 95% of the territory is under government control. The total area of the part of the city's east where the insurgents remain is no more than 10 square kilometers. They reported that 13,000 civilians were evacuated and 5,800 children evacuated in the last 24 hours as well. Let's just have a look at what RT had to say, because they were pointing out comments by John Kerry, Secretary of State, of course, who said this. It's true that there have been some occasions where certain elements of the opposition have threatened people who were going to leave East Aleppo, and in some cases prevented humanitarian assistance from being delivered.
Yeah, so the opposition, they're sort of quite nice people. They just oppose the government.
That's right, and they just opposed any of their human shields leaving the eastern part of Aleppo.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, the BBC still this morning absolutely trying to push forward the humanitarian disaster that Aleppo is. That's how they're describing it anyway. Let's have a look at this one then. So we mentioned this a couple of days ago, Patrick Henningsen's article about the new executive action from President Obama. Let's just put it on screen, which permitted the United States to go ahead and start rearming the opposition in East Aleppo. Well, nobody really believes a word of it, because let's have a look at what Sergei Lavrov had to say. I don't think this will significantly change the situation in eastern Aleppo, because the rebels are encircled and they're unlikely to receive reinforcing.
Yeah.
So there you go. Nobody really cares, at least on the Syrian and Russian side. But let's bring in Tulsi Gabbard, who is a Democratic congresswoman, and she's put a bill into Congress to stop the Obama administration arming Syrian or other terrorists who they may describe as opposition or moderate rebels or whatever. So this is the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. What she had to say was pretty spectacular, because she said under US law, it is illegal for any American to provide money or assistance to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or other terrorist groups. If you or I give money, weapons, or support to Al-Qaeda or ISIS, would be thrown in jail. Yet the US government has been violating this law for years, quietly supporting allies and partners of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Jabhat, Fatah al-Sham, and other terrorist groups with money, weapons, and intelligence support in their fight to overthrow the Syrian government. And she went on to say the CIA has also been funneling weapons and money through Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and others who provide direct and indirect support to groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This support has allowed Al-Qaeda and their fellow terrorist organizations to establish strongholds throughout Syria, including Aleppo. This madness must end. We must stop arming terrorists. The government must end this hypocrisy and abide by the same laws that apply to citizens. That's why I've introduced the Stop Arming Terrorists Bill, legislation based on congressional action during the Iran-Contra affair to stop the CIA illegal arming of rebels in Nicaragua. So there you go. What can we say about that?
What a shame we haven't got the same quality of woman in Westminster at the moment to do the same with the UK government.
Absolutely.
And I can't remember the lady's name in ERA who spoke out in Parliament, also talking about what was going on. But it seems at the moment everybody else has got at least somebody with some morality and common sense left, apart from the bunch that we have in Westminster. And this is coming down to the real problem.
Right. So now last week we suggested that the front against Russia, because everything is Russia's fault, might be moving to the Ukraine. And we highlighted the fact that NATO was having its foreign ministers meeting last week on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then on Wednesday they were holding a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Commission. Again, Boris put his foot into it as well. He said in Ukraine, Russian interference also continues. RT reporting a bit on the situation in Ukraine at the moment as things start to be stoked up. The headline is Ukrainian ultra-nationalist Azov battalion stages torch torch-lit march in Kharkov, and they're saying thousands of supporters of the ultra-nationalist Azov battalion held a torch-lit march on the streets of eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkov under the watchful eye of some 550 police officers. So police didn't get involved in this. They're saying singing and chanting national slogans. Around 2,000 members of the Azov battalion marched through the city. Slogans such as Ukraine above all, glory to Ukraine, death to the enemies, and so on. Now, this is an organization which seems to have a few different wings. It has a non-governmental civilian wing, Azov Civil Corps, and also a political party apparently called the National Corps, which was set up under the Azov umbrella in October. And they, of course, support severing diplomatic, trade and cultural ties with Russia and restoring Ukraine's nuclear power status. So this is all kind of colour revolution stuff going on in Ukraine at the moment. We had the comments from NATO earlier in the week, but it was this that really caught my eye this morning. So this is what's coming next. Here's the final clue as to what's next for Ukraine, because of course the tweet here from NATO's SPS program says 35 first responders successfully complete paramedics train the trainers course in Ukraine as part of NATO SPS project. Now, what's this about? Well, this is the White Helmets. Now, White Helmets were one of the groups not only providing propaganda for the anti-Syrian propaganda for the West, but of course we're also Al-Qaeda in disguise and providing a funnel for humanitarian and non-humanitarian aid to go the other way. So I'm saying that this is White Helmets Mark II, set up by NATO. But the question for me, Brian, is what colour will their helmets be? And I mean,
pink, judging by the man on screen.
No, it's a purple revolution.
Oh, purple. Yeah. Okay, purple.
Yes,
sorry.
But nonetheless, perhaps we're seeing the future of Ukraine, and it doesn't look terribly good at the moment.
No, but everything expected and predicted, Mike. So
absolutely.
I think we're absolutely on course with that. Well, let's switch to the BBC over the weekend, and of course the subject was those nasty Russians. And somebody's put in our chat box a few moments ago that, of course, the Russians are responsible for the weather in Scotland at the moment. And I have to say that I can't agree, because I tweeted out first thing this morning that the Russians were clearly responsible for the horrible weather in Plymouth over the weekend. So back to Mr. Corbyn. He was trying to give a talk, and it was interrupted by what appeared to be very, very well organised protesters, which is, in my mind, always a good sign that somebody with money is funding and orchestrating. So here we are. Here's the headline: Jeremy Corbyn's speech disrupted by Syria protesters, to which I commented on Saturday, I think it was, nice propaganda, BBC. This will be the same BBC that used its charity, BBC Media Action, to work inside Syria to help destabilise the country for regime change. But what we're really seeing is the Lib-Lab Con agenda for war and control of nation states. This is the British soft power. This is the rules-based New World Order, which Boris is talking about. Now, we'll follow it up with this, but stay with us because you'll see how this little saga links up. Here's the Mail, and the story is that Oxford University Union has put out a document telling students that they've got to use gender-neutral pronouns. So instead of he or she, it's going to be Z. And you need to do this because otherwise people will be offending transgender undergraduates. Now, I encourage people to go to the Mail website, because at the end of this article is a video, and the, Norrie is the individual talking about the importance of being gender neutral. So if you don't understand where British society is heading, then the Mail has brought forward Norrie, who's talking about where we're going. And of course, it's Norrie that wants us to conform to the values. So I hope you're with me so far. But in the article, who should be commentating? None other than our old friend Peter Tatchell. And he said it's a positive thing to not always emphasise gender divisions and barriers. It's good to have gender neutral pronouns for those who want them but it shouldn't be compulsory. That's the key issue there, that it's definitely not censorship. So he went on to say, this issue isn't about being politically correct or censoring anyone. It's about acknowledging the fact of changing gender identities and respecting people's right to not define themselves as male or female. Giving people the Z option is a thoughtful and considerate move. So we're now getting some very interesting information here, because apparently we're all morphing. We're no longer male or female. We're morphing into something else. Nobody's talking about what may be causing this problem, but we shouldn't worry, because presumably in the future it doesn't matter whether you're it or cyborg. So we'll just say transgender coming in very quickly, and transhumanist is going to follow. So Mr. Tatchell just happened to also be a man who was part of the protest against Corbyn. And here he is saying that the UK should be dropping in aid because those nasty Russians are killing civilians and bombing civilians in Syria. So massive promotion of Peter Tatchell. I tweeted out, this man's an utter hypocrite, because of course it was Tatchell who wanted to destabilise Russia by promoting his views onto Russian society. It's the same Tatchell who's been calling for a reduced age of consent, and it's the same man who doesn't appear to be doing anything to fight child abuse or to find the 300 missing Syrian children in UK. So let's just remind ourselves that here was Tatchell. This was a few years ago. Big headlines that he's been brutally beaten up in Moscow. What was he actually doing? Well, he was with the gay rights group Outrage, and they gave a keynote speech at the Moscow Gay Pride Conference. He was punched, but later arrested and spent several hours in police custody before being released. What the report didn't say, of course, was that a great deal of people in Moscow were in fact outraged that he should be on the streets telling them how to run Russian society. And of course, later he was ejected from the country. And could it be that Mr. Tatchell is not really interested in the rights of people in Syria? His protest against Mr. Corbyn was to do with his grudge against Moscow for saying we don't really want the views and values of Peter Tatchell. So it's a murky old world. Well, we just give people a reminder that we will be taking a Christmas break. So the last UK column news will be the 16th of December. So that's this Friday.
Yep.
And we will be back on the 4th of January. But as we've said, please watch the website because we will be putting out reports for significant events. And I've no doubt that we'll be continuing to tweet and indeed email some individuals. Now, a request for reasonable, polite, well-behaved support for Tom Crawford. Tom Crawford, who lost his family home back in 2015, is going to be in court. That's 10 o'clock, 60 Canal Street in Nottingham, where he's been charged with criminal damage to his own home. Now, of course, criminal damage should mean a criminal court case, and he should be brought in front of a jury. But his right to a jury has been denied, and Tom Crawford will have to face 3 judges. So this is effectively European law now coming into UK. But Tom has asked for as many people as possible to be there to support him, and of course to watch, see, listen, but ultimately see justice being done. Will it?
No.
No. Well, we get some indication, of course, that justice isn't done in UK. Let's have a look at the Defence Secretary. Here he is, Michael Fallon. And this was a report on the government's own website, Defence in the Media. And what he was talking about in the first instance a couple of days ago was that he was calling for lawyer Phil Shiner to apologise to Iraq war veterans for manufacturing basically cases against the military. So he said that this man had been a bit naughty and that he should apologise. Well, if we get into the background of what this man actually did, the Telegraph here has got quite a comprehensive article. Iraq human rights lawyer Phil Shiner faces being struck off after admitting recklessness. It was all a bit of a mistake, Mike, over army abuse claims. And he paid a tout more than £25,000 to refer so-called abuse cases to him. He brought thousands of cases. This was all part of IHAT, the investigation into what took place in Iraq. He paid a witness to change their evidence in the Al-Swedi inquiry. That was about claims that Britain's mistreated Iraqis in May 2004. The Solicitors Regulation Authority has charged Shiner with 24 counts of misconduct, and IHAT altogether 31 million, and has blighted the lives of 600 military people. But apparently he should apologise, Mike.
Right. Tony Blair isn't among those people, I suppose.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. But
No.
Michael Fallon, of course, upstanding member of Parliament, and you've perverted the course of justice, but really all you should do is apologise. Well, same Michael Fallon, of course, is busy scrapping the military. And this was UK column a couple of days ago when HMS Illustrious, still a functioning warship, was simply sold to Turkey for scrap, £2 million. And this means that at the moment we still have no aircraft carriers. Not a squeak from the top military at the time. Well, we can now inform our viewers and listeners why that was. And here's the answer, that the Second Sea Lord is very big on cakes. So thank you very much to the person who saw this one on his Twitter page. But he says, fantastic cakes in HMS Dauntless during a visit with Min Lords. I think, is that Ministry of Defence? Lords? Wonderful chefs. Now, I know that the food certainly was very good in the Navy, so no disrespect to the chefs. But really, is this the thing that the Second Sea Lord should be tweeting out when we've got ships scrapped? The Type 45s need £1 billion to work properly. No Harpoon missiles, no maritime patrol aircraft, no engineers, no F-35s, no operational carriers. But the cakes are fantastic, Mike.
Brilliant.
Well, if that's not enough, if you go down this man's Twitter page, he has a little joust with somebody who said, well, actually, I've worked for both of them and they weren't all that brilliant. And the Second Sea Lord ends up by saying, ha ha, you win. So this is about a 13-year-old tweet, quality of tweet.
Yeah.
Is it any wonder we've got major problems with Britain's military? What's the matter with these people, Mike? Reframed or simply regression to childhood?
Yes.
Or both?
Yes. And as well as that, in parallel with that, of course, they're worried about populism and the rise of populism and the results of the rise of populism.
We'll be coming on to that because the Pope has got some quite strong views, apparently.
Okay. Well, so does Henry Kissinger. Here he is. He was speaking at the Nobel Prize Forum in Oslo. And he reckoned that before postulating an inevitable crisis regarding Donald Trump's presidency, an opportunity should be given to the new administration to put forward its vision of international order. And he said that no doubt the president-elect is a personality for whom there is no precedent in modern American history. Many of the contemporary structures of peace have either... This one actually made me take a double take, really, because many of the contemporary structures of peace have either American support or American origin, he said.
Yeah,
there
right.
you go. I hope and believe that in the decades ahead, the United States will continue to fulfill its history and tradition of building world peace.
Yep, everywhere they go is peace.
Everywhere they go.
Everywhere.
Iraq, Libya, Syria,
Afghanistan, Yemen, to name a few, but
yes.
It's all peaceful.
It's okay. I mean, you can understand that Henry Kissinger is getting on a bit. There's perhaps a little bit of dementia creeping in, but nonetheless. But of course, Theresa May, as we reported a week or two ago, in the middle of middle of November, rather, was speaking at the City of London at the Mansion House, and of course she's also expressing her concerns about the rise of populism and the disengagement from the globalist liberal agenda. And she stressed at the time that a large number of people are disenfranchised from the rules-based international order. And that it would be a good idea to throw a few more scraps at these people in the hope that they come back into the fold. That was really her message. So we meet tonight in a world transformed. A year ago, few among us would have predicted the events ahead. And she said the people that are living in this world of populism, they see the emergence of a new global elite who sometimes seem to play by a different set of rules and whose lives are far removed from their everyday existence. So we've got to throw them a few more scraps so that they feel a bit more engaged, and then there'll be no problem. And these views were echoed by Mark Carney last week, as we reported. He was talking about the first lost decade since the 1860s. Over the past decade, real earnings have grown at the slowest rate since the mid-19th century. And his message generally as well was, well, we've just got to throw a few scraps at people, and they'll come back on board. We don't need to worry. We've just got to be a little, just not much, but just a little bit more towards them. Don't worry about them. Well, we've got a new view, another view, an alternative view perhaps to this, and it's coming from the London School of Economics. Now, this view says that Theresa and Mark don't need to throw scraps at the populists. Instead, they need to give the populists a good reframing, and so they'll be happy in their poverty. Brian, we'll all be happy in our poverty. It's all about well-being. And this is according to the Centre for Economic Performance at the London School of Economics. And they're saying having good mental health and having a life partner, make us all happier. And in fact, those things make us happier than doubling our incomes, apparently. So there's no need to double our incomes because we've just got to make sure that people are happier. And this is research by the London School of Economics. 200,000 people they surveyed for this, so it must be right. Now, they said that on a scale of 1 to 10, that doubling someone's pay saw their happiness rise by 0.2 on a scale of 1 to 10, right? But if that person had a partner, instead of getting a pay rise, their happiness would rise by 0.6.
On a scale of 1 to 10.
On a scale of 1 to 10. So that's really brilliant stuff. And what Professor Richard Laird, who was one of the authors of this, says is that this demands finding a new role for the state, and the state needs to play this role. It needs to mess with citizens' happiness.
Yeah,
right?
It needs to get into their heads, Mike.
Absolutely. And we've got to focus on well-being creation rather than wealth creation. So they're having, over the next today and tomorrow, a conference about this at the London School of Economics, because it's all about well-being creation and not wealth creation.
So you turn the screw, people sliding into poverty, they haven't got jobs that mean anything, they don't get any job satisfaction, their homes are being taken from them, we're being fined at every turn. And if that's going to make you a bit depressed, then we're going to throw well-being, mindfulness training at people to make them feel happy, even though they're not really happy.
Even though their lives are crap. Now, what's really interesting was that he said that it wasn't that people cared about having low incomes. They compare their incomes with people around them. So long as everybody's got a low income, it'll all be all right.
Yeah. Well, I think this sounds very sensible, and it's heading us towards a really delightful country to live in, as we're going to see.
Yes. Now, of course, at the heart of the constitutional reform agenda in the UK is the House of Lords. And I just thought this article in The Independent was fantastic for so many reasons. Everyone I owed favours to died 700 years ago, one peer says, as the House of Lords rejects reforming itself. That's the headline. And it says, a myth commonly put about in these post-truth times is that the House of Lords is unelected. Rubbish. Fully 30 of the 909 members of the place, that place the Lord's second, fully 30 of the 909 members are elected, basically is what they're saying, when Tony Blair kicked out the hereditary peers in 1999. And this is the key point. Tony Blair kicked out hereditary peers in 1999, totally unconstitutionally and unlawfully. 92 of them were given permission to remain. It wasn't Tony Blair's right to give them permission to remain. Unfortunately, so since then they have brought in all the life peers rather than the hereditary peers. They've brought in, 850 of them or whatever it is. They've made the House of Lords unmanageable, let's put it that way, in terms of the numbers of people, and they want to close it down. And they're now using this business of targeting the remaining 30 89 hereditary peers. 30 of them have been re-elected in the recent time. And they're basically saying, well, this re-election is a nonsense because they're re-elected by other lords. They're not. It doesn't go to a popular vote, so we've got to get rid of it all. And they said that they were debating ending such by-elections and allowing for the tradition of hereditary peerage slowly to come to an end via natural causes. And nobody has any right for this to come to an end
because Parliament's sovereign. Parliament is supreme. I think the statement was we mentioned.
Yes, but the problem is that for Parliament, what they actually mean is government and the House of Commons. And the problem is that the House of Lords has defeated the House of Commons so many times in the last number of sessions that they want to get rid of it. They want an elected House of Lords because an elected House of Lords is less of a barrier to the government agenda than this unelected House of Lords. So they're promoting the idea that this unelected House of Lords is undemocratic, unconstitutional. It's neither of those things. It's actually extremely democratic and it's extremely constitutional because what it's doing is holding the House of Commons to account in many more cases than not. So we lose it at our peril because it's one of the few things which is actually delaying the march of this, how do we describe it, totalitarian dictatorship. Yeah.
Okay, well, stay posted for material with the British Constitution Group, that particularly into the new year. There's going to be much that will come out on the British Constitution Group website about what has been done, what needs to be done, and how to do it. So stay posted on that. Well, if you mention Russia Today, you're pretty close to being a terrorist. So here's an article from Russia Today. And it's a very, very interesting subject because it says UK far-right group to be banned as a terrorist organisation in historic move. And this is referring to National Action. Now, the first thing we'll say, there may be some unpleasant people, but it doesn't seem to me that this group is actually funding terrorists who are busy killing people. They may be saying hateful things. They may be saying some pretty unpleasant things. But of course, let's remember it's our own government that is giving terrorists the money to actually kill and maim people overseas. So let's bring in the Home Secretary, Ms. Rudd, because she's, I think, been getting her knickers in a twist about this one. So the BBC is hot on it, of course. Far-right group National Action to be banned under terror laws. So let's see what the lady had to say. She says, National Action is a racist, anti-Semitic and homophobic organisation which stirs up hatred, glorifies violence and promotes a vile ideology, and I will not stand for it. So what we can see coming in very clearly is you speak about race, and presumably that means immigration, you're a terrorist. You say something which is critical of the Jewish community, you are going to be a terrorist. Or if you say something about the gay agenda, you're also going to be a terrorist. This is not a joke. This is coming in very quickly.
And she will not stand for it?
She will not stand for it. This is the same woman who will stand for the widespread abuse of children, because, of course, Amber Rudd has not lifted one finger to fully investigate child abuse across UK. So she's very happy with the child abuse. But she doesn't want anybody to say anything nasty because that might hurt feelings, and clearly you're going to be a terrorist.
And of course, the British government is doing nothing to discourage the rise of these types of groups in the Ukraine, for example.
Well, no,
because suits their purpose.
Well, because that's all to do with those nasty Russians, Mike, and it's okay if they can be used as a tool against the Russians. But we don't want anything like that here in UK. Well, if you think that's just National Action and why should we be bothered, then it took The Guardian to flag up the real danger, because here we are, Home Office forced to defend anti-fracking groups for extremism claims. And basically, what it's really saying is if you speak out against the government, you speak out against fracking, and you're a terrorist. And if we look at the meat of this article, it was the City of York Council included anti-fracking activists in its Prevent programme. So you were identified, you were tagged, you were fed into the Prevent programme as a potential terrorist. Now, the controversial centrepiece of the government's strategy to tackle extremism and thwart terrorism is Prevent. We've talked about this before. And of course, we've had policemen and women, particularly from the Met Police, saying that in their opinion, the Prevent programme is designed to actually create extremism and help promote terrorism. They also question as how billions of pounds were made available to do this. So there we are. We're now seeing the government clamping down on anybody who says something hateful, nasty person. Okay, if you're hateful against Russia, but you mustn't say anything hateful in a homophobic way, for example. But let us remember what UK Column has been warning about, and this is the rise of Theresa May's psychiatric prison gulag, because we've got this organisation set up across the country, MAPA, the Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangement, and this is now linked in with multi-agency support hubs, which claim to be part of social services, but what they're actually doing is creating data and sharing it with everybody, including Prevent. So you have an altercation at your school, maybe your UKIP, maybe your BMP, that's reported back into the MAPA organisation, some 63 of them across UK. And as we're now seeing, that interfaces into the Prevent strategy. Now, of course, the other bit that's coming in with it is that if you challenge the government, you are clearly being considered to be mentally unwell, and that means that you can be moved across to psychiatric care. This is the system of the gulags, and Theresa May is the lady that's been working hard to bring it in. This was a comment sent to us several months ago. It says the Department of Work and Pensions is a partner to the team you mentioned, and all frontline staff have a procedure to follow for referral. If a person is deemed suicidal or at risk, you're going to be flagged up is what the person's saying. So mental health training and NLP courses are currently being offered to people by DWP, but they also want to know all the detail about your financial assets and a full background check, which is then being shared with local authorities, the MAPA, the MASH groups, and into Prevent. This is a gulag, and let's bring in this woman and see the true horror of her, because several years ago, UK Column was saying that as Home Secretary, this woman was building a huge spider's web, which was taking us towards a conservative Stasi state. And we're now seeing that coming in very, very clearly with links to the police, courts, local authorities, and vast databases where we're all flagged up. So mention Russia today, you're clearly a terrorist. I've just done it, so presumably I'm on the hit list. And here is the next part of it. Please don't forget that Francis Maude was boasting that he'd been able to link in Britain's intelligence and surveillance systems directly to Israel.
Can't say that.
Well, I just did.
That makes you anti-Semitic and a terrorist.
And a terrorist. So probably I'm flagged up on Prevent. But of course, what we have now is the fact that data being shared with British intelligence services is also being shared across with Israel. And not only Israeli intelligence services, according to Francis Maude and indeed British government documents, it's also being shared with Israeli universities who are also working closely with the intelligence services. So we've got 1984 upon us, and that is that if you dare criticise the British government in any way, fracking, for example, then you are going to be labelled a terrorist.
Right. Now, state benefits. This is the third attempt to get this in the programme. I'm glad to say we're covering it today because we'd run out of time on Thursday and Friday last week. But basically, this is a report from the government on the latest figures on benefit overpayments in the UK. And they're saying it's good news, though, Brian, because £1 billion in overpaid benefits through fraud and error was recovered in 2015 and 2016, according to the latest figures. They're saying that overall, fraud and error is lower than it was in 2010, so that's good, at 1.9% compared to 2.1% in 2010, and that overpayments due to official error and claimant error have hit a record low of just 0.3 and 0.5% respectively. So claimant error is down to 0.5%. Now, this is important. We'll come on to that in a second. Let's have a look and see what David Freud said, who's the Minister for Welfare Reform. He said, "We will not tolerate fraud and will pursue those who try to cheat the system. We have strengthened penalties and powers to combat fraud and error in the benefit system and are introducing reforms such as universal credit, which will reduce fraud and error and is expected to save £1 billion when fully rolled out. Many deserving people rely on benefits when hard times hit, so it's vital we stop those who try to divert funds away from them and maintain a system that is fair to those who use it and those who pay for it." Well, that all seems pretty fair enough. So let's have a look at the graph showing the historic levels of fraud and claimant error over the years. And as we can see, fraud was always lower than claimant error until the last couple of years, and suddenly they've done an about face. So fraud is going through the roof, according to this, and claimant error is falling like a stone. So why might that be, do you think?
Because it's pretty easier. It's easier to go for the claimants who've made a mistake and simply label it as fraud, and then you help the government and you claim that we're tackling fraud.
So
when of course they're not.
What they did was they changed the definition of fraud. Right? So they changed the definition of fraud. Now, they don't tell us exactly what that definition is, but they changed the definition of fraud, and that is the reason why claimant error is falling like a stone to 0.5%, because claimants who have made errors are being accused of fraud, and of course, you are guilty until proven innocent.
And you're not going to get a jury anyway. You're not going to get a jury of your peers.
Absolutely. And so, there is no question that there is fraud in the benefit system. That is true. But the fact of the matter is that in this digital transition, it has not become easier to claim benefits. It has become harder to claim benefits. And so any suggestion that claimant error has fallen like a stone while fraud has risen proportionately, this is unbelievable. So last week, Brian, we were discussing how much money Plymouth City Council was spending on bailiff charges to recover money that was allegedly a debt to the council. And I would very much like to know how much money is being spent to recover money which is being overpaid, either by accident through the Department of Work and Pensions itself or through claimant error. And the fact that the Department for Work and Pensions are not there to help claimants through the system properly, and that they're simply defining things as fraud and taking criminal action instead. So it's not only bailiff costs, legal costs as well. This is a disgrace, and all it's doing, of course, is putting more and more pressure on vulnerable people mainly. And that's not to discount the fraud that is there, but I don't believe for 1 second that the government is doing a good job on this.
Well, they're doing a good job of protecting the government, but not looking after people. But don't worry, because I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to rely on the church to help poor people and people who are suffering under the system. And what better place to start with that than to bring in the Catholic Church? And it's Pope Francis. And he's got a bit upset about fake news. He's not so interested in child abuse or Russians he's a bit upset with as well, I think, but he's warning the media over sin and spreading fake news and smearing politicians. It's very unfair to smear politicians. Well, if you think this headline is bad enough on screen, it gets worse, because let's take you into what the man was really talking about. He said, I think the media have to be very clear, very transparent, and not fall into, no offence intended, the sickness of coprophilia. That is, always wanting to cover scandals, covering nasty things, even if they're true. So we've got a couple of issues here. One is, he said, well, even though there might be nasty things going on and scandals, we don't want to report it. It might be the truth, but really we don't want to report it, because if you do want to report this sort of stuff, you're showing signs of the sickness of coprophilia. And if you're not sure what that is about, he goes on to tell people. So this is from the article from Reuters here. Using precise psychological terms, Pope Francis said scandal-mongering media risk falling prey to coprophilia or arousal from excrement, and consumers of these media risk coprophagia or eating excrement. And since people have a tendency towards the sickness of coprophagia, a lot of damage can be done. Now, I found this absolutely fascinating, that the Pope should be saying really that if you continually tell the truth, you're smearing politicians, and you are equivalent to somebody who is eating excrement. Does this sound like a severely disturbed mind to you, Mike? Because it certainly does to me. I think it is a mind that is somewhere exceptionally dark, even on the basis that you want to protect politicians who are committing crimes, because you don't want to tell too much truth. We'll leave the coprophilia aside. But if there's anybody, particularly anybody who's a Roman Catholic, that can tell us how we can have Christ's vicar on earth coming out with such advice, we would certainly like to know. But maybe that's going to put us in the terrorist bracket, Mike. Don't know. But help is on its way, because, of course, Britain's political party representatives, formerly known as members of Parliament, have got everything under control. And thank you very much to the person who sent through a letter that they'd received from Pat Glass MP, Labour political representative for North West Durham. And she was asked simply, how will you vote with regard to leaving the EU? And here's a letter, and there's a lot to it, and I'm going to encourage people to do a freeze of this screen so that they can read it themselves. But there's very detailed, convoluted paragraphs in which he says, well, I know a lot of people voted to come out in the country, a majority, and I know in Durham area it was a majority. There are some people who don't think we should come out, and because the government hasn't got a clear plan at the moment, I'm not quite sure what I am going to be doing. And the inference is, if you read this page, that she's saying that really the only sensible people are the people who are saying that probably better for jobs if we don't come out. So we'll just label this. Does she understand democracy? That the nation has voted they want to come out, but she's not sure she's going to back that up. But we also did see that she's vice chair of the all-party parliamentary group for local democracy. So don't worry, this lady seems to have everything under control. Where's it going to go? We don't really care about you little people.
No.
So
well, why should she?
Well, it's a very good point, really. If you're a party representative, you're representing the Labour Party or the Conservative Party or the Lib Dem Party, that's your job. And people who live in the country are just a bit of a nuisance. Well, there we are. Don't quite know what to say. The Pope seems to have got the main advice, which is we don't want too much truth coming out because it produces widespread panic, BBC, for example. And if you do report the truth a little bit too much, then according to the Pope and Reuters, you're equivalent to somebody who eats excrement. So welcome to Britain in December 2016. If you sense that we are heading into madness, This is the orchestrated breakup of the United Kingdom. And of course, all three parties are collaborating to produce this chaos in the nation. If we can see through it, we can do something about it. We'll end there. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.